Review the Israel dossier on Hassam Shabbat Gazan journalist just targeted and killed. Don't you still meme that journalists aren't targeted? I don't care. For pro-Pally people, like if you take the worst and most interpretations of everything that I say, then yes, that is what I say. So whatever you're linking, you are correct. Okay, thank you for educating all of us. Turkish student at Tufts University detained. Video shows masked people handcuffing her. A Turkish national who is a doctoral student at Tufts University has been detained by federal agents without explanation, her lawyer said Wednesday. She's detained by Homeland Security. Wait, do we know anything about this, or is it just an arrest? There's no point until we know anything about it. I don't know what the point is of you can't arrest people without necessarily reading charges or anything else. So unless something else has happened, watch the video.
Thanks to our
This podcast with Ezra and Derek is pretty good, minus the Lex part. Yeah, it's 3 hours though. We might watch this. I haven't decided yet. Fuck this, we're not reading this. It's good for the 20 minutes that I watched. Trump places 20% tariff on imported autos, expected to raise $100 billion. This comes on what, April 2nd? Didn't we already expect this to happen? Because didn't he delay them by a month or something? We also have a meme story. I say a meme story, but... Jesus, track me, baby. Private data and passwords of senior U.S. security officials found online. Donald Trump's most important security advisors used Signal to discuss an imminent military strike. Now reporting by Der Spiegel has found that the contact data of some of those officials, including mobile phone numbers, is freely accessible on the internet. Well, if something more particular comes out, then maybe this sounds a little bit retarded, but I don't know. All right. Their accounts and passwords are already outed and active from old data breaches. Yeah, basically everybody has like an email or password that's available in some data breach. There's been so many huge dumps of passwords and shit online over the years. In article, it says that most are still in use. Yeah, but it doesn't. The fact that they're not putting anything juicy up here means that it's all probably dumb, irrelevant shit. Like old passwords to like Instagram accounts and stuff. Like, okay. Or like phone numbers. I mean, you can't do anything with just a phone number. It's not. It could be bad, but I don't know. I'll save anything. If another article gets released, it's not like. It's just whatever. Tulsi's number was linked to a Signal account too, though. Okay, so what do you think that means? That if I have your phone number, I can just get into your Signal account? Is that what you think that means? What do you mean? Would you say that people being arrested by ICE without explanation have the right to defend themselves from what would effectively be kidnapping? I think anytime you're getting no-knocked or whatever, you probably can. I'm pretty sure courts have already literally ruled in favor of you doing that. There have been cases where people have shot officers breaking into their home doing no-knock raids that have like won in court on self-defense. I think the harmful part of the claims in that article would be if the phone numbers were used to make the Signal accounts that people use to coordinate military operations. Why would it matter, though? You have to have the SIM card for the phone number. What do you mean? Do you think just having a phone number means there's been a huge breach? Or like just having a phone number is not enough. You'd have to demonstrate something else. You can spoof SIM cards, maybe. True, but SIM card spoofing is something that you could do with theoretically almost any. Like this is why you shouldn't use apps like Signal to probably do this type of stuff, right? I would hope or imagine that the government has special contracts with whoever they use for cell phone providers to not allow SIM cards to be released to anybody. But yes, Destiny, you can get SIM swapped and you don't need the SIM for that. Yeah, but I mean, anybody could SIM swap you by just finding your number is not considered like ultra confidential information. This is why you just don't use apps for classified intelligence stuff. But I mean, I would hope that the government has it so that whatever contracts they have with cell phone providers aren't allowing people to release SIMs like that. That would be the hope. But Twitter artist Gemzar offers his perspective on if Hassan used AI merch. This is is it Warren James or something? Whoever like this company uses, they do use AI. I don't even think they deny that. So the only dumb thing would be if Hassan said that they absolutely don't. That would be stupid of him if he does deny that. But you can socially engineer phone company and SIM card swap. Yeah, that's why you're supposed to tell the phone company to never release the SIM card without an additional layer of authorization. So that you can't just socially engineer some tier 1 tech support retard to do that. I would hope or imagine that the government has, like I said, a special contract with the phone carriers so that those SIM cards aren't as easily released. He denied it for the guillotine, if I recall. He did deny it last time. Yeah, he might have. I don't remember. I think his denial, though, was like, no, I paid a company to do all of it or something, or I paid somebody else, and then people wonder, well, maybe those artists use AI or something like that. I understand it's Signal. Again, why the fuck do Sims matter? I don't think it does, but people want to sensationalize everything. I don't know. It just seemed pointless. Unless they were able to show any other type of thing, but flashback to 2017 when the Atlantic called Signal the gold standard of encrypted messaging and admitted it was used by Obama and Hillary Clinton staffers. You can use these apps if you're not talking about like classified information. This is not the same claim though. Signal, the gold standard of encrypted messaging and calling, is used by staffers who work for President Trump, Obama, Hillary, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, and New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. This doesn't mean that it's okay to transfer classified information on the app though. Especially war plans. Was there another press thing earlier today?
But on day one, we're ending the inflation nightmare that Joe Biden created and caused, but just by his spending. Two things, his spending, but I think more important, he destroyed our energy policy. And energy started going up, gasoline, any form of energy went through the roof.
Wait.
But on day one, we're ending the inflation nightmare that Joe Biden created and caused, but just by his spending.
Somebody said you can use Signal on a computer without a phone. I don't think that's true. I think you can use Signal on your computer, but I think you have to create an account with a phone number first. I think. I could be wrong on that. I think Telegram is the same, maybe? No, I think on Telegram, I think you can have just an account on desktop. I think, maybe with Telegram. What is the benefit of them using Signal? Signal is like it's a very secure application that does good end-to-end encryption, and I think most people consider it to be probably one of the gold standard like messaging apps, I think, right? But it's not, but that doesn't mean that it's good for communicating classified information or war plans for a variety of reasons.
No, what's
Should Secretary Hegseth consider his position over the Signal?
Hegseth is doing a great job. He had nothing to do with this.
What do you mean?
Hegseth. How do you bring Hegseth into it? He had nothing to do. Look, it's all a witch hunt.
What?
Here we are talking
Based. It's a witch hunt. It's fake. Fake news. Not real. Bullshit.
about some of the greatest business.
Does he even know what the is going on?
In the world are moving into the United States, and you want to ask about.
Does he actually know what's going on?
I don't know that Signal works. I think Signal could be defective, to be honest with you. And I think that's what we have to, because you use Signal, and we use Signal, and everybody uses Signal.
I don't think that many people use Signal. It's probably one of the more unheard of like apps. Like if you're chatting with somebody and you're like, "Oh, bro, like add me," and they're like, "Yeah, what do you use? What are you on, like Snap or WhatsApp or Instagram?" No, Signal, bro. Trying to sell me drugs? What?
Planning is where they try and figure out how not to screw it up across generations, and they're notoriously bad at it. It's very hard to keep wealth in generations.
Down in the 20th century, we had 2 world wars and a Holocaust. That redistributed wealth. I would prefer not to have that again.
Yeah.
This was such a great conversation. Christ.
but I took care of them. No, but I took care of them. I said I was going to, and I did.
Is there any talk of, because they lost opportunity, they lost income, any kind of compensation fund? Or
Well, there's talk about that. We have a lot of people talk about it. A lot of the people that are in government now talk about it because a lot of the people in government really like that group of people. They were
The January 6ers. Jesus Christ.
patriots as far as I was concerned. I talk about them a lot. They were treated very unfairly. You know, the thing they show is they show a group of 1,000, whatever it may have been, 1,500 people down. What they don't show, you never see the crowd that day. It was the biggest crowd I've ever spoken before. It went all the way to the Washington Monument. It was so wide, you virtually couldn't see anything else but people. They never show that. Whether it was 1 million people or less than 1 million, I don't know what it was, but you know, I see Bernie Sanders has a few people out there. They say, "Oh, the crowd is so big." They don't talk about the crowds, but a group of people went down there peacefully and patriotically. Remember that, you know.
We can't keep up with all the fucking interviews and press conferences and hearings and trial. Yeah, Jesus.
5 minutes. Thank you so much. It should not be surprising that the president is doing everything possible to make it more difficult for the media to hold him accountable and for the
Wasn't this a far less damaging leak of classified info than Hillary's emails? No. Unless you can point to what leaked from Hillary's emails that was damaging. One thing.
public to be informed about his reckless and illegal behavior, yet here we are. The Republicans have actually organized this goofy hearing to try to convince the American people that PBS and NPR are, quote, domestic terrorists, or domestic threats, my apologies, not the incompetent, unqualified Secretary of Defense who's texting war plans to journalists. But it's y'all, PBS and NPR, the American people are supposed to be worried about. You can't make this up. It's as stupid as it sounds. The American people should be worried about the president threatening to investigate NBC for treason for reporting on his felony convictions, or arresting reporters and stripping networks of their licenses for not saying nice things about him or not using Gulf of America. The Republicans' witness, Mr. Gonzalez, went so far as to suggest that because NPR and PBS reported on the murder of George Floyd, they, quote, represent a danger to our physical health as well as to civic health of our body politics. Ms. Mayor, do you think reporting on the murder of George Floyd and highlighting instances of systemic racism is a domestic threat to America?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I believe it's our responsibility to report on all issues of interest to the American public.
Thank you so much. Ms. Kerger, what about
Does anybody fight here?
eliminating funding for station route infrastructure?
Unanimous consent, please.
Shall make no law respecting or establishing speech is not about whatever it is you want somebody to say. And the idea that you want to shut down everybody that is not Fox News is bullshit. We need to stop playing, because that's what y'all are doing in here. You don't want to hear the opinions of anybody else. And the Constitution says Congress shall make no law respecting or establishing of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the
gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman's time has expired.
Madam Chairman, can I
critical
continue to the
misspeak.
record?
Oh no.
In the world. Seriously. That is crazy, huh?
Fair. No leak from the private server. Fair. Destiny. I do think setting up that server in her home for official business signals a more sinister intent. No, as opposed to a moron adding someone to a group chat. No. because she didn't intentionally conduct any kind of classified affair or business out of that server at all, which I think is pretty obvious given the fact that of the tens of thousands of emails they went through, there were like 100 that ended up being classified. So it seems to be the case that if you do think there's a malicious intent, which is fair to assume or to use as the basis of an investigation, when people searched more, they weren't able to find all these troves of classified emails. They weren't able to find this intent to do business that was circumventing some kind of government oversight. That just never was the case. There were no charges brought. There isn't even an accusation that that was the case. People use private phones and everything for a whole bunch of different things. There's nothing wrong with it. There's just certain types of stuff that either have to happen on official lines that need to be preserved for record keeping, for instance, war plans, or stuff that should be communicated in a secured environment like war plans. Isn't 100 a lot? Why did she not get in trouble? Because I think of the 100 or so classified emails that were found, I think most of them were retroactively classified. So stuff comes out and then retroactively like classification is applied to stuff. I believe. Somebody can find the exact number. I don't remember. Why did she not get in trouble? Because in order to be criminally prosecuted, her behavior was criticized by Comey. He did come out publicly and criticize it, saying that they were being sloppy. Everybody in the State Department was being sloppy with how they treated communications that could become classified or might be classified if people just are missing the marking on the email or whatever. But in order to be criminally liable for it, you have to prove intent. That's why Biden wasn't criminally charged. It's why Pence wasn't criminally charged. Simply removing classified information or having classified information in some area where it's not supposed to be is not enough to rise to the level of a criminal charge. You have to demonstrate a willing maintaining of that information outside of a secure environment, like a knowledgeable or like you have to act with like willful recklessness with regards to that information or something like that. So none of that rose to that level, or at least the FBI didn't feel like it did. And I mean, typically it usually doesn't. You would have to see somebody say like it would be really difficult to prove that. Like somebody would have to literally say something as stupid as, I was supposed to declassify this when I was president, but I didn't, but I'm showing it to you now. Like they'd have to say something like crazy like that to probably convict somebody of the crime of willfully retaining secret information. Or they would have to do crazy shit like trying to hide the information intentionally, like moving boxes around their Mar-a-Lago residence, knowing that investigators were coming, then lying about turning over all of it. They'd have to do stuff like that to demonstrate a willful intent to maintain classified information outside of an area where it's supposed to be stored. But, you know. Hillary was also never in office. Hillary, I don't know, I think it was for all 8 years. Hillary was the head of the Department of State under Barack Obama, which was her office, where she would have dealt with classified information. Was it? It was for all 8 years, right? Was it not for all 8 years? I don't remember. Maybe it was for 4. Maybe it was for 1. Maybe it was for 69. Secretary of State, United States. Timeline. Jesus Christ, what the fuck is this? It's bullshit. Okay, maybe Kerry was second term? Oh, this is much easier. Never mind, hold on, sorry. Okay, yeah. Oh, we got a Harry Sisson response to our drama memes. Oh boy. 2.5 minutes. Here, watch this for a bit. We'll be back 1 sec.
That's a big... Her father was a great... Pat Summerall, a great announcer, really great football player and announcer for the NFL for like 27 years. He really got the NFL. He did pretty well with the NFL. He got him off to a very good start, didn't he? But he was great. But she's got those same traits. So thank you very much, Susie. Great job. Also, we're going to go to somebody that's really the rage right now. She's the youngest ever White House press secretary, Caroline Levitt. Caroline, look at you, huh? They said, sir, she's just too young. And I said, I don't know about that. She did awfully good because she did it during the campaign and she was awfully good. And she's been amazing. She just did another one just a little while ago. She looked at Susie and looked at me. I don't know. I think I'm ready, sir. How old are you? 27, right? 27. And I said, you're not too young. And she's knocking them dead. Everyone's talking about you. Thank you very much. Great job. And we have somebody else who's like a rocket ship, the counselor to the president. She served me well. I'm going to miss her, but we'll see a lot of her anyway. I hope it's on friendly basis because I've got to be very concerned because she's going to be the new U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey. Alina, where's Alina Habba? Alina Habba. Thanks, Alina. She's going to be great. I'll tell you, she's going to be great. She's a great lawyer and lives in New Jersey. And I said, that sounds like a good combination. Everybody wanted that job. They're all looking for the job. I said, wait a minute, doesn't Alina live in New Jersey? Yeah, I think Alina's going to get that job. So congratulations, Alina. It's fantastic. I'm also thrilled to say that we have more women in our cabinet than any Republican president in the history of our country. And joining us today is a woman I've known a long time. You talk about strong women. This is a strong woman. Remember, they were saying, he doesn't like strong women. That may be true, but if that's true, I'm in deep trouble because I'm surrounded. I got the strongest women. And this is a beautiful, strong, wonderful woman. Attorney General Pam Bondi. But yesterday, you know, she was talking about these guys that like burning down cars and plants and everything else. And I was watching her on television. She said, I'm going to get you. We're going to find you. And you're going to suffer. And I say, man, I don't want her after me. And, you know, it's amazing. The attacks have gone down very, very precipitously. And so Pam is fantastic. Thank you very much, Pam. Really amazing. Along with a woman who was given a very hard and difficult problem, the cost of eggs. This was the problem. The cost of eggs. Eggs were through the roof. If you got to see the Biden chart, it's like a rocket ship, and Trump is like this way. But I gave Brooke the Secretary of Agriculture, and I didn't know it. I didn't know it. She studied that in college. I didn't know that. I was going to give it to her anyway. It didn't matter that she studied, but it sort of helped, right? But she came in and she lowered the cost of eggs by almost 50% in 3 weeks. Right? Someday you're going to tell us that secret. I want to find out. But the chart looks great. It's Biden like this, and then we're like this. But we also, by the way, we lowered energy costs really like tremendously. Energy's way down. Cost of gasoline's way down. The cost of groceries, a word that I used a lot on the campaign. It's like an old-fashioned word, but it's a beautiful word, very descriptive word. And the groceries are coming down, Brooke, at a level that we're finally getting costs under control in our country. And people don't like talking about it because it's so good, it's so positive. I haven't seen one story on eggs plummeting by 50%. But someday they'll get around to writing it. Secretary of Education, she's trying to put herself out of a job. Linda, she's trying to put herself out of a job. She's moving education back to the states, and she's doing it at a rapid rate, and she's an amazing woman. I've known her also for a long time. She's been amazing. No matter where she's been successful, including with her husband building a tremendous empire. And Linda McMahon is very special. Thank you, Linda. Thank you. And it's getting praised, by the way, the concept of moving education back to the states, back to the mothers or the fathers. And you probably do it for less than half, and you're going to have great, great schools. You know, I say that in our country they have charts, and they rate the countries, various countries, and Norway and Denmark and Sweden and lots of places are rated at the top. And Finland China's rated very high too. Tell me, that takes the big problem out, because if they can do it, that's big, so we can do it. And we're rated toward the bottom. We're at number 37, 38, 39, or 40 out of 40. So we're just about last. And yet we're first in one very nice category, cost per pupil. So obviously there's something wrong. We just have to repeat that, Linda, and everybody says, well, I guess it's time to do it. And it's been that way for a long time. And originally we had it run by home state, so we never had that kind of a problem. But it's going to be, Katie, it's going to be brought back again, and Linda's going to do it. And I just say, you know, she said, you basically want me to get out of government, don't you? I said, that's right. Do your job and get out. But I promise I'll have something else for you, okay? I promise I'll have something even better for you, all right? But you're doing a job, and we appreciate it. Also, a special man. He's got a tremendous majority. It's so easy, a majority of about one. I think he's the only man could do the job because everybody loves him. Everybody respects him. He's really smart. Really, he's so nice. People say, is he smart? I said, you have no idea. He's actually, you know, he's really nice because he's smart. He knows it's the only way you can live with it. Where is Mike? Mike, it's the only way you can do it. He's the nicest guy. But in actuality, he's not a nice person. He's ruthless. You haven't seen this guy when he gets angry. I'll ruin your image overnight. He is a phenomenal guy. Our great speaker, Mike Johnson. Thank you very much. I don't know. Is that good or bad for you? I'm not so sure. It's okay. He said whatever the heck you want to say is okay. First female Republican Attorney General of Iowa and an early supporter of Trump. And where's Brenna Bird? Brenna, thank you very much. She's so popular in Iowa. She came out so early, and I appreciate it very much. That's great. Alaska Lieutenant Governor Nancy Dahlstrom. Nancy, thank you, Nancy. Thank you very much. You have a great governor, too, by the way, Nancy. He's also tall. He's seriously tall. I mean, the guy's like 7'2". He is a tall guy, but he's a great governor. And I have a son who's tall like him. And Barron is very tall. They're all tall, but Barron's seriously tall, right? So anyway, say hello to him. He's a great governor. South Carolina Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evett. Where is Pamela? Thank you very much. Good job you're doing. Great job. Good. And good luck with...
I forgot to turn my speakers on. Did he say anything fun?
With everything. I know it's big stuff, right? Oh, good. Thank you. Well, you have a great governor. Oklahoma Agricultural Commissioner?
No. It's time for a daily hypocritical Joe clip. It's always time for those clips, baby. What? Here. Come here. Look. Here. Hi. Wait, is it actually...
I still see, if you are a journalist in Washington, I see these CNN correspondents running up and chasing down senators in the hallways, being like, Senator, what about the January 6th Commission? Senator, do you support the against January 6th Commission? What about subpoena power whenever it comes to the January 6th Commission? Meanwhile, and we recently covered this, there is a national reckoning around home prices in America.
Okay, but they're not mutually exclusive, right?
Well, but
the January 6th thing is important.
See, it is important, but is it the 6 months later? Should be the ruling number one conversation of a journalist?
I think it's really important. And one of the reasons why I think it's important because it highlights the reasons why a guy like Donald Trump is so fucking dangerous. Is because a guy can incite a bunch of morons to do something really fucking stupid. And now that he's silenced off of social media, and now that that actually did happen, once it becomes a thing, it can be like mass shootings, right? They didn't exist, then they did. Right. Now they're a thing. So that could be a thing again.
If it was a real commission, I would believe you, Joe. But knowing how these things work, I know that this commission
fucking hack, fuck, partisan loser
would be some sort of bullshit, like the Benghazi report before it, or many of these others. And maybe we should even ask, why are these people all like, why are you willing to storm the Capitol for Trump?
They already said why. What do you mean? It's not really that hard to understand if you listen to literally anything he was saying, you dipshit.
I can help you out with that.
Yeah, please tell me. Yeah.
Because they're idiots. There's a lot of idiots.
It's not just because they're idiots.
It's very easy to survive.
But I think here's the
That's
thing.
what. But that
here's
is what it is.
Here's where I really agree with you.
He got another victim to the woke mind virus, unfortunately.
That has exploded in the past week. I want to talk openly and honestly about this entire controversy that has exploded in the past week. First and foremost, I want to start by saying I fucked up. I should have told the people I was talking to that there were other people, and of course I regret that decision, and I've reflected on it a lot, and I'm learning and going to be better in the future. Now, what I will say is that this entire situation has been blown wildly out of proportion by MAGA Republicans to further their political agenda. Like, we all know that they don't actually care about this. They just hate me. That's why they care. I mean, when has MAGA ever cared about women? Also, MAGA has been spreading misinformation about the situation, so I want to set the record straight. I was not in a relationship with anyone. I wasn't exclusive with anyone. I never met anybody in person. I never spoke to anybody on the phone, and it was done among consensual adults. That's it. It was a very casual thing. Additionally, we as Democrats have to get better at recognizing someone who makes a mistake and can learn from that mistake, and someone who does actual harm to a community. We cannot, as a party, just attack and demonize people who make mistakes, people who are learning from their actions. If we ever want to hold office ever again and actually win an election, our umbrella should be as wide as possible, and we shouldn't be trying to silence people or push people away who are vocal on these issues. And the final thing I'll say about this is that people involved in this situation released my private text messages, private photos of me, intimate details about me that intended to stay private without my knowledge or consent. I didn't consent to any of that, a complete violation of my privacy. And I think that regardless of your political beliefs, you can agree that that's wrong. I certainly wouldn't do that to somebody, and I know you wouldn't either.
Yes.
One thing I'm particularly proud of my generation for doing is moving past this idea that we should idolize politicians beyond their impact. However, I'd like to look at the other side of the coin. When politics becomes a game of pointing out any small mistake someone makes, we are putting our feelings above what truly matters, how we are all impacted by the actions our leaders take. And I'll conclude with this. I have some bad news for MAGA. I know they thought they could use this situation to try to take me down or silence me, but that was never going to work. I'm still going to be vocal about the things I care about and fight for the things I care about. And if that upsets MAGA, then so be it.
Nice. Devin Archer, the business partner to Hunter Biden, I think he testified against Hunter, apparently got pardoned. He had all these hours of testimony. I feel like I remember this from so long ago. Supposedly he had so much testimony he was supposed to bury Hunter Biden, but like nothing ever fucking came of it. But Trump pardoned him, thank God. Did Hunter not get convicted? Not for anything related to what they were going after him for. They went on a fishing expedition and ultimately convicted him of not paying his taxes quick enough because there were some overdue taxes, and for having a firearm but also doing drugs. Not at the exact same time, but just overlapping. Good one. My Second Amendments. Jesus.
Care about rules and laws or borders or enforcers.
Is she dressed up like a superhero? Is this like a Captain Marvel outfit?
Because I don't acknowledge you, you're not real, you're a superhero like me, so act like it. Act like a god, because that's what you are.
Okay. That's Spider-Woman.
right? Democrats still think the currency of politics is money and the currency of politics is attention. And that's a huge difference between the two sides right now.
I think the steel man is very easy to make here. Department of Government Efficiency. That sounds like an organization that's needed if government is inefficient. And one of the themes of our book is just how inefficient government can be. Not only at building houses, building energy, often at achieving its own ends. Building high-speed rail when it wants to build high-speed rail, adding affordable housing units when it wants to add affordable housing units. I love Ezra's line that we don't just need to think about, deregulating the market. We need to think about deregulating government itself.
Did these guys both write a book together? Or are they the ones that, I know that Ezra has some book, Abundance or something, that he released a while ago? Am I making this up?
Getting the rules out of the way that keep government from achieving the democratic outcomes that it's trying to achieve. This is a world in which a Department of Government Efficiency is a godsend.
I was 14 when Hillary was in government. I see people mention her emails in Benghazi, but I don't know much about the two. Is there a 20-second explanation for Benghazi emails? The emails thing, were we made aware of this because of the Benghazi, or not the Benghazi stuff, because of the Guccifer leaks from the DNC? Is that when that first happened? Basically, Hillary had, she used a private email for doing work, I guess. And then the accusation snowballed into she was using the email to conduct business that should have been conducted on a private government line, that she was doing classified business or whatever on her private server when she should have been doing it on a government server. There was a huge fucking investigation. Not that much classified material was found. They could never prove that she knew any of it was classified or anything like that. They didn't find the intent of her operating like that, but Republicans found a way to drag this out for years and years and years, trying to imply that she was intentionally trying to hide stuff from the government by doing business on a private email server that literally everybody knew she was using. So she did a shitty job at hiding it if that was her goal. The Benghazi stuff, I have not dug deep into the Benghazi stuff. My understanding is that there was an attack on an embassy, I think, and they had to pull out people from that embassy as a result of the attack. I think people died for the Benghazi stuff, but Republicans try to claim that the State Department should have known ahead of time because they have some low-quality evidence that there might have been an incoming attack, which I'm sure we get on all of our embassies all the time. They try to say that Hillary Clinton was basically responsible for that. They did a ton of hearings on this. Famously, Hillary Clinton sat through an 11-hour, I think it was just one hearing, right? 11 hours of hearings, but they didn't find any malicious intent or that they dropped the ball horrendously on something, I think. Yeah. If I recall, shit around her email started. Shit started once FOIA requests on her calendar and schedule found nothing for years. That might be true. I don't know. I'm not sure.
We should be absolutely obsessed with making government work well, especially if we're going to be the kind.
Why did she delete her private email server email after getting a subpoena? She didn't delete it. The person who was managing the server, I think, ended up wiping everything. But I think this was. I don't know if these were things that he was doing sequentially, or not sequentially, on schedule or whatever. Although I think he had received the request already to retain the information. But I mean, the FBI interviewed him and they went through everything, and I don't think they ever charged him with a crime. It didn't seem like he was intentionally trying to hide it or anything. Is what they ultimately came to the conclusion of. But they've seen troves of her emails on other people's computers and everything. They were able to find any wrongdoing at all. So. Oh, he had immunity for testifying or whatever, so that's why he wasn't charged with a crime. But I don't believe Hillary had immunity for anything, though. But some people will say because he had immunity, then he didn't indict Hillary on anything. But
of liberals who believe that government is important in the first place.
In my lifetime, the Democratic Party has never been as internally fragmented and weak, leaderless, rudderless, as it is right now. Now, it won't stay that way. You cannot change American politics. You can't change the Democratic Party if you're not willing to upset people. Donald Trump reformed the Republican Party by being able to fight Republicans. He ran
The following is a conversation with Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. Ezra is one of the most influential voices representing the left wing of American politics. He is a columnist for the New York Times, author of Why We're Polarized, and host of the Ezra Klein Show. Derek is a writer at The Atlantic, author of Hitmakers and On Work, and host of the Plain English podcast. Together, they've written a new book, simply titled Abundance, that lays out a kind of manifesto for the left. It is already a controversial, widely debated book, but I think it puts forward a powerful vision for what the Democratic Party could stand for in the coming election. If I may, let me comment on the fact that sometimes on this podcast, I delve into the dark realm of politics. Indeed, politics often divides us, and frankly, brings out the worst in some very smart people. Plus, to me, it is frustrating how much of the political discourse is drama and how little of it is rigorous, empathetic discussion of policy. I hate this, but I guess I understand why. If the other side is called either Hitler or Stalin online by swarms of chanting mobs, it's hard to carry out a nuanced discussion about immigration, healthcare, housing, education, foreign policy, and so on. On top of that, anytime I talk about politics, half the audience is pissed off at me. And no, there is no audience capture. I get shit on equally by different groups across the political spectrum, depending on the guest. Why, I don't know, but I'm slowly coming to accept that this is the way of the world. I try to maintain my cool, return hate with compassion, and learn from the criticism and the general madness of it all.
Wow.
Still, I think it's valuable to sometimes talk about politics. It's an important part to the big picture of human civilization, but indeed, it is only still a small part. My happy place is talking to scientists, engineers, programmers, video game designers, historians, philosophers, musicians, athletes, filmmakers, and so on. So I apologize for the occasional detour into politics,
Hi, baby.
especially over the past few months. I did a few conversations with world leaders, and I have a few more coming up. So there will be a few more political podcasts coming out, in part so I can be better prepared to deeply understand the mind, the life, and the perspective of each world leader.
Okay.
I hope you come along with me on this journey into the darkness of politics, as I try to shine a light on the complex human mess of it all, hoping to understand us humans better, always backed, of course, by deep, rigorous research and by empathy.
Thank you.
Long term, I hope for political discussions to be only a small percentage of this podcast. If it's not your thing, please just skip these episodes. Or maybe come along anyway, since both you and I are reluctant travelers on this road trip. But who knows what we'll learn together about the world and about ourselves.
True.
This is the Lex Fridman podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. You are both firmly on the left of the U.S. political spectrum. Ezra, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. You're often referred to, at least I think of you as one of the most intellectually rigorous voices on the left. Can you define the ideals and the vision of the American left?
Oh, good. We're starting small here.
And maybe contrast them with the American right.
Sure. So the thing I should say...
Hi, family Ukraine. Their city is getting messed up right now. As an American, do you have any advice for me when they tell me they feel hopeless, betrayed, and abandoned by the U.S. as your president favors Russia? Nope. Tell them to leave. Move. I don't know. Good luck.
Here is that you can define the left in different ways. I think the left has a couple fundamental views. One is that life is unfair. We are born with different talents. We are born into different nations, right? The luck of being born into America is very different than the luck of being born into Venezuela. We are born into different families. We have luck operating as an omnipresence across our entire lives. And as such, the people for whom it works out well, we don't deserve all of that. We got lucky. I mean, we also worked hard and we also had talent and we also applied that talent. But at a very fundamental level, that we are sitting here is unfair. And that so many other people are in conditions that are much worse, much more precarious, much more exploited is unfair. And one of the fundamental roles of government should not necessarily be to turn that unfairness into perfect equality, but to rectify that unfairness into a kind of universal dignity, right? So people can have lives of flourishing. So I'd say that's one thing. The left is fundamentally more skeptical of capitalism and particularly unchecked forms of capitalism than the right. I always think this is hard to talk about because what we call unchecked capitalism is nevertheless very much supported by government. So I think in a way, you have both. Like markets are things that are enforced by government. Whether they are, how you set the rules of them is what ends up differing between the left and the right. But the left tends to be more worried about the fact that you could get rich building coal-fired power plants, belching pollution into the air, and you could get rich laying down solar panels, and the market doesn't know the difference between the two. And so there's a set of goals about regulating the unchecked potential of capitalism that also relates to sort of exploitation of workers. There's like very fundamental questions about how much people get paid, how much power they have. Again, the rectification of economic and other forms of power is very fundamental to the left. When you think about what the minimum wage is, I am a successful podcast host. When I go into a negotiation with the New York Times, I have a certain amount of market power in that negotiation because other firms want to hire me. When you are a minimum wage worker, the reason we have a minimum wage is in part to rectify a power problem. A lot of workers do not have market power. They do not have a bunch of job opportunities. They're not working with firms. And by the way, without certain kinds of regulation, those firms will cartelize and make it so they can hold down wages anyway. So trying to rectify power imbalances is, I think, another thing folks on the left take more seriously. That would be a start of things that I think broadly unite maybe let's call it the intuitions. I want to say that's a podcast answer, not a book. I'm sure I left a million things out here, but I'll start there.
I mean, there's a lot of fascinating things there on the unfairness of life. That could be the interperson unfairness, so one person getting more money than another person, more skills or more natural abilities than another person. And then there's just the general unfairness of the environment, the luck of the draw, the things that happen. All of a sudden, you cross a street and the car runs a red light and runs you over and you're in the hospital. So that unfairness of life. And in general, I guess the left sees there's some role or a lot of role for government to help you when that unfairness strikes. And then maybe there's also a general notion of the size of government. I think the left is more comfortable with larger government as long as it's effective and efficient, at least in its idea.
That's certainly true in the last 100 years. It was New Deal liberals who enlarged the government in the 1930s. It was Republicans who acquiesced to that larger government in the 1950s. And then starting in the 1970s, 1980s, it's typically been conservatives who've tried to constrict government. Sometimes they failed, while liberals have typically tried to expand, certainly taxing and spending. But one thing that I was thinking as Ezra was talking, and I was just writing this down because I thought Ezra's answer was really lovely, but like at a really high level, I thought, maybe disagree with this. I thought about distinguishing between liberals and conservatives based on three factors: what each side fears, what each side values, and what each side tolerates. I think liberals fear injustice, and conservatives often fear cultural radicalism or the destruction of society. And as a result, they value different things. Liberals, I think, tend to value change. And at the level of government, that can mean change in terms of creating new programs that don't previously exist. It's typically been liberals, for example, who've been trying to expand health coverage, while conservatives have tried to cut it back. Just in the last few years, it was Biden who tried to add a bunch of programs, whether it was infrastructure, the CHIPS and Science Act, the IRA, and then Trump comes into office and is unwinding it. And then I also think they tolerate different things. I think liberals are more likely to tolerate a little bit of overreach, a little bit of radicalism in terms of trying to push society into a world where it hasn't been. Well, I think conservatives are more likely to tolerate injustice. They're more likely to say there's a kind of natural inequality in the nature of the world, and we're not going to try to overcorrect for it with our policies. And so I think that even at a layer above what Ezra was articulating with the policy differences between liberals and conservatives, there's almost like an archetypal difference between what they fear and value and tolerate. Liberals fearing injustice, seeking change, tolerating sometimes a bit of what people might think of as overreach, while conservatives fear that overreach, value tradition, and often tolerate injustice.
The only thing I would say is that I do think this sort of the left likes big government, the right likes small government, oversimplifies.
I was going to say, one of the issues, I'm sure they'll get into it because it's a long fucking show, is you run into an issue of those concepts that I talk about, those tricky, sneaky concepts, where I don't like speaking only on a conceptual level without giving examples. Although, to be fair, the other guy did give examples, which is nice. But Ezra's probably about to say it. When you talk about like big government, in some ways, the conservatives do like big government. In some ways, liberals do like small government. Sometimes it depends on the issue that you're talking about. So you have to get a bit more granular there about what it is you're discussing when you say government overreach or whatever the fuck else. But
the left is pretty comfortable with an expansive government that is trying to correct for some of the imbalances of power and injustices and imbalances of luck I talked about earlier. The right is very comfortable with a very powerful police and surveillance and national security state. I always think about the sort of George W. Bush era, although right now with ICE agents hassling all kinds of green card holders, you can think about this moment too. But the right's view that on the one hand, the government is incompetent, and on the other hand,
it's impossible. Like that can't be a fundamental axiom that they don't trust big government, or that they don't trust. What are you doing? Chill. Like they'll say things like they don't trust the FBI, they don't trust the CIA, they don't trust all these federal bodies. But whoo-wee, when it comes to the FBI working with ICE, when it comes to the Department of Homeland Security and immigrants or deporting immigrants, now all of a sudden these agencies are gods.
We could send our army across oceans, invade Afghanistan and Iraq, and then rebuild these societies we don't understand into fully functioning liberal democracies that will be our allies, was an extraordinary level of trust in a very big government. I mean, that was expensive. That took manpower. That was, compared to we're going to set up, the Affordable Care Act in America, that took a lot more faith in the U.S. government being able to do something that was extraordinarily difficult. But the left has more confidence in the government of the check, and the right has more confidence in the government of the gun.
You're right. There's some degree to which what the right when the right speaks about the size of government, it's a little bit rhetoric and not actual policy, because they seem to always grow the size of government.
That's not at all what he said, but okay.
Anyway, they just kind of say small government, but they don't. It's, you know, in the surveillance state, in the foreign policy in terms of military involvement abroad, and really in every program, they're not very good at cutting either. They just kind of like to say it.
Cutting is really hard. If government spends trillions of dollars, and if you cut billions of dollars, someone is going to feel that pain and they're going to scream. And so you look at defense spending under Reagan, you look at overall spending under Reagan. Reagan might be one of the most archetypally conservative presidents of the last 40, 50 years. He utterly failed in his attempt to shrink government. Government grew under Reagan. Defense grew, all sorts of programs grew. So I think that one thing we're sort of scrambling around in our answers is that at a really high level, there are differences between liberalism and conservatism in American history. But often at the level of implementation, it can be a little bit messy. Even Bush's foreign policy that Ezra was describing, sort of from a big sense of American history, is very like Wilsonian, right? This sense of like it's America's duty to go out and change the world.
Or to use a current example, McKinleyan.
Or McKinleyan, right. And a lot of people compare Donald Trump's foreign policy to Andrew Jackson, this sense of we need to pull back from the world, America first, we need to care about what's inside of our borders and care much less about what's outside of our borders.
You're going out.
Sometimes the differences between Republican and Democratic administrations don't fall cleanly into the lines of liberal versus conservative because those definitions can be mushy.
All right, so to descend down from the platonic ideals of the left and the right, well, who is actually running the show on the right and the left? Who are the dominant forces? Maybe you could describe, and you mentioned Democratic Socialists, the progressives, maybe liberals, maybe more sort of mainstream left, and the same on the right with Trump and Trumpism.
So on the right, it's pretty straightforward at the moment. And the right is composed differently than it was 10 years ago. But the right is run by Donald Trump and the people who have been given the nod of power by Donald Trump.
Yep.
So that is right now Elon Musk, but Elon Musk's power is coming from Donald Trump.
Yep.
That is, maybe in some degrees J.D. Vance, maybe in some degrees Russ Vought, maybe sometimes, Homans over at DHS. The right, beneath that, the Republicans in Congress are extraordinarily disempowered compared to in other administrations. They are sort of being told what to do, and they are doing what they are told. Republicans in Congress, Senate Republicans, they didn't want Pete Hegseth. They didn't want Kash Patel. They didn't want Tulsi Gabbard. They didn't want RFK Jr. Nobody got elected to be a Republican in the Senate, hoping that they would confirm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a member of the Kennedys, a Democrat who was pro-choice and running as a Democrat 2 years ago, for HHS. But Donald Trump told them to do it, and they did. So the right has developed a very, very top-down structure. And one of Trump's talents, one of the things that makes him a disruptive force in politics, is his ability to upend the sort of coalitional structure, the interest group structure that used to prevail. The Koch brothers were the big enemy of the left, 10, 15 years ago. The View was that in many ways they set the agenda of the right. The Koch brother network is much less powerful under Donald Trump because he just disagrees with them and has disempowered them. Not to say none of their people or none of their groups are meaningful at all. They are, but you wouldn't put them at the forefront in the way that you might have at another time. Right this second, we're using the left, but Democrats are in fundamental disarray. There is no leader. Senate Democrats decided to vote for the continuing resolution avoiding a shutdown, or a critical mass of them did. Hakeem Jeffries, the leader of the House Democrats, and Chuck Schumer, the leader of Senate Democrats, are in bitter disagreement over whether or not they should have done that. Democratic leadership isn't even united on the single biggest point of leverage they might have had. They disagree over whether or not it was even a point of leverage. Outside of them, the party has no leader, which is fairly normal after a pretty crushing defeat. But there isn't the next in line. So you go back, right? And it was pretty clear that, after Barack Obama, it was going to be Hillary Clinton. After Hillary Clinton, it was either going to be Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders had come in second in the primary. Joe Biden had been the vice president. You often have a presumptive next nominee who the party can look to for a kind of leadership. Even after 2000, Al Gore was still giving big speeches. There was a question about Al Gore running again. There is no presumptive in the Democratic Party right now. You can't turn around and say, oh, it's going to be Pete Buttigieg, it's going to be Josh Shapiro, it's going to be Gretchen Whitmer. Absent, parties are given force, modern parties, which are quite weak by historical standards. Modern parties tend to be given force by a centralizing personality. Donald Trump being a very strong example of that on the right, but Barack Obama was the person who held together the Democratic Party for a long time. In my lifetime, the Democratic Party has never been as internally fragmented and weak, leaderless, rudderless, as it is right now. Now, it won't stay that way. There's a rhythm to these things. There'll be a midterm. They're probably going to pick up a bunch of seats in the midterm. If that means Hakeem Jeffries becomes speaker after the midterm, he's going to have a much louder voice because he's going to have power. It's going to be a harder road for Schumer to get back to the majority because of the Senate map. And then we'll start having a primary on the left. And you'll begin to see voices emerge out of that. But right now, the Democratic Party, it doesn't have points of power. There's simply, outside of, at the national level, there is no Democrat who wields control over a branch of government, right? They don't have the Supreme Court, they don't have the House, they don't have the Senate, they don't have the presidency, and they don't have a next in line. So you're looking at an organization without any of the people in a position to structure it. And the head of the DNC, the new head, Ken Martin, doesn't have power in that way. So it's they're pretty fractured.
You got a lot of criticism for this, but you were one of the people that early on said that Biden should step down. Why is the Democratic Party at this stage in its history so bad at generating the truly inspiring person? To me personally, AOC is an example of a person that might be that person.
You should have her on the show.
What?
I would watch that.
Definitely. But, I really try to, and we'll talk about this, I try to do like 2-3 hours, and there's a hesitancy on the left, especially to do these kinds of long programs. I think it's a trust issue. I'm not exactly sure what it is. 80% of the people on the show are left wing. I'm pretty good faith, and I try to bring out the best in people.
Have you invited her? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Well, we'll see what happens when people get closer to 2028.
Sure.
Maybe people begin taking that
I
kind
hope
of risk.
so. Bernie's up there in age, so he can't do it anymore. Why is the Democratic Party so bad at generating
I don't think it's so bad at generating them. I think that it turned out to be bad at generating them this year. Look, as you mentioned, back in February 2023, I was somebody who came out and said, Biden can't run again. This isn't going to work. And my view, and that was really what that set of pieces was about the argument that even though Biden was clearly going to win the primary, that there was still time for Democrats to do something the parties had done in the past and have an open convention. And you could structure the lead up to an open convention in a number of different ways, right? You could have something like a mini primary, but basically you'd have Democrats out in the media, out giving speeches, and their ultimate audience would be the delegates at the Democratic National Convention. And my hope was through that, you would find the person for this moment. The thing for Kamala Harris that was really difficult was she was for another moment. She was picked by Joe Biden in 2020 amidst just a very different political equilibrium, a sense that you had a transitionary moment between two versions of the Democratic Party. Maybe Joe Biden reaching a little bit back to the past, to these sort of lunch pail, blue collar Democrats. Joe from Scranton was a big part of the Joe Biden appeal. But also Biden never has a chance if he's not Barack Obama's vice president. And so you have this sort of weird set of historical factors operating at the same time. There's a desire for stability and experience amidst the chaos of Donald Trump and the pandemic. There is Biden as Obama's vice president, who nevertheless did not run in the election after Obama. I think a lot of people look back at 2016 and think, you know what, if Biden had been the candidate, he would have beaten Trump and we would live in a different reality. And then Biden chose Harris as an effort to shore up his own at least assumed weaknesses, right? He's a white man in the Democratic Party at a time when the Democratic Party is diversifying. And when the view of how you win elections is you put back together the Obama coalition. And the Obama coalition is young people, it's voters of color, and it's enough working class white voters and then college educated white voters, right? That's the Obama coalition. And so Biden picks Harris, for different reasons. My view at that time was I was sort of a Tammy Duckworth person and thought he should have picked Tammy Duckworth. But there are different people out there. And then the kind of moment that Harris was running in just sort of dissipates. First, she has a particular background from California, where she's a tough on crime. Her book is called Smart on Crime Prosecutor. But she runs in the Democratic Party at a time when it's turned on that kind of politics. People want a lot from her personally, but they don't want a sort of prosecutorial character. So she sort of abandons that and never, I think, really finds another political identity, certainly before she begins running, in 2024 that works. But she's a talented debater. She's a very talented performer on the stump, but she doesn't really have a theory of politics and policy that she's identified with. But she's a way for Biden to signal that he understands that him being, in 2020, a 78-year-old white guy, he understands the future is not him, or at least not just him. And he's sort of trying to make a coalitional pick that speaks to his own, potential weaknesses. I think by 2024, you have two problems, right? Once he only steps down, June? They are weeks from the DNC. They don't have time anymore for an open convention. The Biden administration is very unpopular for a number of reasons, but particularly inflation and cost of living. So now you have Kamala Harris running with the sort of anvil of being associated. It's a Biden-Harris administration. She doesn't really have a lane on cost of living. It's not something she's known for working on in the Senate. It's not something she has a bunch of great ideas about, not something she's great at talking about. It's probably not the candidate you would pick for a cost of living election. And she's had no time to build that out, right? Maybe if she had been running in a primary for, a year and a half, having to fend off Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg and whomever else, she either would have figured out how to do it, right? Primaries are periods of education and learning for the candidates too, or they would have found somebody else who could do it. But she doesn't get any of that, right? She's thrown into the game with 3 months to go. So, they picked the candidate in 2020 who won. Whether you think Biden's inspiring or not, he was a reasonable pick for that moment. He should have never run for a second term, and he sort of implied to a lot of people that he wouldn't. And then the handover to Harris was a very difficult handover to a candidate who didn't go through any kind of selection process for the moment in which he was running. We'll see what they do in 2028, but the consequences of what they did in 2024 have been severe.
There's two really big questions on the table that I think click together in an interesting way. You asked, one, why did Trump win? And two, why do Democrats have this certain communication style that might make them less interested in coming onto an unstructured 3-hour conversation with you? Let me try to tell a story that connects them. I think Trump's victory in 2024 was overdetermined. There are a lot of factors here. Number one, if you look internationally, incumbents lost all over the world. They lost in the US, they lost in Europe, they lost in pretty much every developed country at rates that we really haven't seen in 50 years. And that's largely because the inflation crisis that came after COVID created an absolute disaster for incumbent establishment power. People couldn't bring prices down, voters were furious, and they were destroying establishment orders all over the world. Democrats happened to be in power, and as a result, they got the brunt of it. That's number one. Number two, if you look at elections over the 21st century, two things are true. One, almost every election is unbelievably close. For reasons that I'm not sure I entirely understand. The parties have gotten really good historically.
It is really weird that, like, even in our quote-unquote blowout elections, for some reason it seems like in American politics, our elections are always very, very, very close. And they always swing back and forth, like, over and over again. It's kind of weird. From Republican to Democrat to Republican to Democrat.
Bizarrely good at getting each group to come to the polls with about 48%, such that every election is a battle over the next 1.5%. And in a world like that, little thermostatic swings are very important. And what we've seen over the last few years, and there's this theory about thermostatic public opinion in American politics, that says that what often happens in politics is one party has a very compelling message of change, they become the establishment, and then they become the victims of exactly the weapon that they marshaled. That then the next outgroup party says, we have a theory of change and we're going to throw out the bums. And the next party comes in and they overreach and then they lose. In a world where you have thermostatic change and every election is very close, you tend to have elections swinging back and forth. So I think that also explains why Democrats and Republicans have struggled to hold on to power for 6-year, 8-year, 12-year terms the same way they did, say, in the 1930s or 1960s. But finally, you have to look at what kind of character Donald Trump is and what kind of a media figure he is. We were just talking off camera about how every age of communications technology revolution clicks into focus a new skill that is suddenly in critical demand for the electorate, right? The world of radio tech.
Somebody's doing something on my hallway, Jesus.
Technology is a world in which Franklin Delano Roosevelt can be powerful in a way that he can't be in the 1890s. And then you have the 1950s. Dwight Eisenhower, 1956, I believe, was the first televised national convention. Famously, the 1960 presidential debates between JFK and Richard Nixon take an election that is leaning toward Nixon and make it an election that's leaning toward JFK because he's so damn handsome and also just electrically compelling on a screen. We have a new screened technology right now, which is not just television on steroids. It's a different species entirely. And it seems to provide value for
attention whores,
individuals, influencers, and even celebrities and politicians who are good at something like live wire authenticity.
True.
They're good at performing authenticity, as paradoxical as that sounds. Trump is an absolute marvel at performing authenticity, even when the audience somehow acknowledges that he might be bullshitting. He's just an amazing performer for this age. And it speaks to the fact that he seems to be, to borrow Ezra's term, remarkably disinhibited in front of every single audience. There doesn't seem to be this sort of background algorithm in his head calculating exactly how to craft his message to different audiences. He just seems to be like a live wire animal in front of every audience. And I think that compares very distinctly to the democratic character of bureaucratic caution in our age.
Yeah.
And there is a really important distinction between this vibe of the Trumpian ruler and the vibe of the rule follower. And the vibe of the bureaucratic rule follower is a little bit afraid of unstructured conversation, is always performing the background algorithm of how do I communicate in a way that balances all of the coalitions on my side. Because if you look at the Democratic Party right now to compare to the Republican Party, I mean, in 2015, I think there were 4 political parties in America. There was MAGA, there was the center right, there was the Bernie wing, and there was the Biden, Clinton, Obama wing. And what happened is that Trump killed and skinned the center right and is now wearing it as a hat. The entire Republican Party is Donald Trump wearing the skins of the old center right, the Romney wing. And the Democratic Party is still a fight. It's exactly what Ezra described. It's a jungle. And maybe there's something about that jungle nature of the Democratic Party that is making some of its leaders perform this sort of coalitional calculation when they're communicating, such that it makes them less interested in appearing in settings that might cost them, that might not benefit them in exactly the sort of pre-calculated way they have to get their message across. And so there's not necessarily a whole lot of empirics to that theory. I'm a little bit going on vibes here, and maybe Ezra sees some flaws to the theory.
It's an age of the vibe.
It's the age of the vibe. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to perform the live wire authenticity that I'm describing. But I do think that might begin to explain why you, Lex, might be picking up on a difference between the political vibes, an eagerness and a willingness on the one hand to have kind of unstructured and even chaotic conversations, and to care on the other side about not letting conversations become too unstructured or too careless.
Can I build on that? I know we're supposed to talk about abundance, but I want to talk about this.
There's an abundance of time.
An abundance of time. We're on the Lex Fridman show. So 2 or 3 things. One is Democrats still think the currency of politics is money and the currency of politics is attention. And that's a huge difference between the two sides right now. So what did Kamala Harris come in and do? She came in and raised a shit ton of money, right? Like $1 billion in record time, basically. She had more money than Donald Trump did and used it to try to buy attention. What it meant for Democrats to be good at social media is to have a good social media team. People in your office somewhere, in your campaign headquarters, who put out cool things on social media, good memes and good advertisements and so on. What it means on the right to be good at social media is to be you personally good at social media. You're Vivek Ramaswamy, you're JD Vance, you're Donald Trump, you're Elon Musk, and what you understand is you are the product. What it means to be good at attention is you are good at attention. Now, Harris, I think, was actually better at some dimensions of this. They were just slightly older dimensions than people always gave her credit for. Hell of a performer on the stump. She was way better on the stump than people realized she would be. And a good debater. She'd always been a good debater. She trashed Donald Trump in that debate. But she does not do social media herself at any level, right? Because she's not going to take risk. Most Democrats still live in a world where the thing that they are optimizing for in attention is to not get negative attention. And what the Trumpist wing of the Republican Party understands, and this is truer for them than it probably would be for Democrats, because for them, the media is the enemy, or at least the mainstream media is, etc., but is that attention, a volume of attention is itself good, and you can only get a critical mass of it if you're willing to accept negative attention. Agenda control doesn't come from positive attention, it comes from conflict. You get agenda control by doing things the other side disagrees with, so they enter into functioning agreement with you to keep the thing you're doing at the front. Now, that doesn't make you highly popular. Donald Trump is the most unpopular modern president at this stage of his presidency, except for Donald Trump's first term. It took, I think Nate Silver said it was 221 days for Joe Biden's net favorability to go negative. It's taken something like 55 days for Donald Trump to do the same. So what Donald Trump is doing does not optimize for favorability. It does not optimize, by the way, for big wins. Democrats feel like they got trashed in 2024, and in a way they did. But Trump's popular vote victory was the smallest popular vote victory since 2000, when Al Gore, beat George W. Bush by 17 dogs and 3 old men, or whatever it was. And so attention works really differently. And while I think some of the the Rogan of the left discourse has been frankly overstated, because honestly, the most parsimonious model of 2024 and 2020 is in 2020, you have a 48-48 nation, something like that. Or maybe you have something that's more like a 49 Democrat, 47 Republican nation. And in 2020, because of the pandemic, Donald Trump suffered let's call it a 2.5 point incumbent penalty. People are mad about the pandemic. They're mad about things being chaotic. So he loses 2.5 points. That gives, given the natural split of the electorate, Joe Biden a 4.5 point popular vote victory. In 2024, people are mad about inflation. They're somewhat mad about the border. You have a 2.5 point penalty applied to the incumbent administration. Now it's Harris. And you get a 1.5 point popular vote victory for Donald Trump. I genuinely don't think, and this held internationally too, right? I genuinely don't think you need a lot more to explain the election right now than that. But you do need something more than that to explain Donald Trump's now, since 2016, almost decade-long dominance of all attention in American politics. Starting when he came down the golden escalator in 2015, Donald Trump, American politics from 2015 to 2020, when Joe Biden won, was about Donald Trump. Then from 2020 to 2024, when Joe Biden was president, it was about Donald Trump. And then from 2024 on, it's about Donald Trump. Joe Biden was an attentional void, be it his age, be it their strategy. This
is one of the things I talked about, that me and Dan talked about, that it was actually probably a mistake, the idea that, oh my God, we're like a real president that we're not hyper fixated on all the time. Thank God. But it's probably actually not a good thing. You want the attention whores. We live in an influencer economy. Unironically.
He agreed that the topic of the nation should be Donald Trump, right? When he went back to begin his campaign in 2024, he goes to Valley Forge and gives a speech about January 6th and Donald Trump, right? It wasn't about his own achievements. It was about Donald Trump. Joe Biden didn't do the Super Bowl interview, right? In 2023. That's when I did my thing about this is not going to work. Probably because at that point he was not capable of good extemporaneous interviews. I mean, I think that was my view of them, right? That the revealed thing here was that they didn't trust him to do interviews. I didn't have some inside information about anything. I just looked at what they were doing, what they weren't doing. They're behind in the polls. They weren't doing things like the Super Bowl interview. If you can't turn your candidate into the product, and so that was to me the tell. But attention is the coin of the realm. Now, there are better and worse ways of doing it. I don't think Donald Trump is doing himself huge favors right now. I think there was a path they could have walked to be a majority party. I think that if he was more restrained, more inhibited, if he was able to not do a bunch of things that are mobilizing opposition to him, you could talk about what they would or wouldn't achieve that way, but I think they could be in a much stronger political position. That would make them stronger for the midterms. It would eventually make, JD Vance stronger as a successor. I think they are running a very high risk strategy that has a very reasonable chance of, if they don't make a, what I would call like an autocratic breakthrough, they might completely blow up their own movement, right? It's all very high risk. So for them, like for everybody, for everything, what makes them good at politics is also what makes them bad at politics. But for Democrats, the caution, the sort of bureaucratic culture, the fear of saying anything that will make anybody mad, it is optimized for a different attentional era. And one of the things I am watching when you were saying about leaders, one of the things I'm watching in the people coming up, the ones who want to run in 2028, is who...
Oh, fuck, because everything is like streaming, because that's my perspective, that everything in life is basically like streaming now. I guess something that's kind of funny is one of the things that I always give people the advice, right? The stream through it, all those memes. People will have like a dramatic situation and then they'll think it's like the end of the world. And I'll say like, as long as you keep making content, generally stuff passes. It's just the way of the internet now. In a way, the Republicans kind of operate that way, such that Democrats function in a way where they're too afraid of having these like negative moments. Republicans don't care because they can just have a negative moment and they'll just keep pushing through it. And then eventually people forget, which is what happens. So that's why they can do like horrible thing after horrible thing after horrible thing after horrible thing. They know it just doesn't stick around because it doesn't.
Who seems like they've adapted to this era, not in the way Trump did or Vance did or Musk did. I think they're going to need something different. They fully represent the Twitter era of politics. I mean, Musk bought Twitter. They're sort of all in on what politics right now, what online politics feels like. I think the thing that will come next is someone who's able to synthesize both the lessons of it and the feeling that we all have that it's kind of sick and poisoned. Right? That Twitter's not a good place. X is not a good place. TikTok politics is not a good place. That we're all being turned on each other. Somehow you need to be authentic and authentically angry at what we've all become in the way that Obama ran as a political reformer who hated the red and blue cut of America, who hated what political consultants and pollsters were doing to us. You're not going to have somebody who just echoes. There's not going to be, there will be no Joe Rogan of the left. There will be no Donald Trump of the left because the left is different than the right. But it will have to be something authentically of this era, but also authentic to the backlash to it, which I think as we enter into this period where the president and everybody around him fully embraces this attentional economy, I think people are going to want something different from this attentional economy in 4 years.
And be okay with the negative attention that comes with being authentic.
You're going to have some of it, right? You cannot change American politics. You can't change the Democratic Party if you're not willing to upset people. Donald Trump reformed the Republican Party by being able to fight Republicans. He ran against George W. Bush, against Jeb Bush, against Mitt Romney, against the trade deals, against a bunch of things that were understood to be sacred cows. Somehow this guy ran.
How do you counter that? I don't know. I think there's something to be said. There's another type of analysis that I've never engaged in. There's something to be said for maybe the strength of the conviction of what both parties believe in as well. Or I don't know. Maybe that could be untrue. Like one hypothesis is that Democrats believe in the things that they say that they believe in. So when you run a campaign, you're a little bit constrained by whatever Democratic beliefs are. Whereas on the Republican side, like you can clearly see, because of the way that Trump lives his life and the things that he's done and everything, that there are things that Republicans said they believed in that they clearly never believed in, right? So the complete 180 on a hawkish foreign policy, actually 180s just in the past 2 months on hawkish foreign policies over and over again. It might just be that Republicans, ironically enough, are more powered maybe by an emotional worldview that is more reactive to things that are upsetting them. And so you can capitalize on that better on an emotional sense. Whereas on a Democrat playing field, you're a bit more constrained by policy. You have to be within your certain messaging thing. You've got a lot less room to maneuver. Maybe, I don't know.
Like right after Mitt Romney and John McCain, while attacking Mitt Romney and John McCain, right? If you are not, like the Democratic Party does need to change. It needs to attain a different form because the Obama coalition.
I'm Florida District 1. Valamont does a good job in conflict. She's doing town halls. When people ask questions, she's straight up about her views, even if it's MAGA asking who she knows may not like her answers.
And is exhausted. It's done. It's not going to be able to do that if it doesn't have standard bearers who are willing to say, we were wrong about some things. We have to change our views on some things. We have to act differently and speak differently.
Is there a degree to which the left uniquely attacks its own more intensely than maybe other parts of the political spectrum?
It's possible. You go back to the model that I gave you of 2015, where there used to be these four large parties: MAGA, center right, center left, and left. Right now, the Republican Party is all MAGA.
Like, I understand his analysis, and he's correct in identifying four wings, kind of, but the size and power, like, I don't know if the progressives ever even got as much power in the Democratic Party as like the Tea Party got in the Republican Party. Like the Bernie wing, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has always been largely absent from Congress or from office in general, I think, until like the justice systems. And even at that, the number was incredibly small. But my understanding was, I think the Freedom Caucus, I want to say were they fucking things up for in the end of Bush's term? How old, or was it just Trump won? When did the Freedom Caucus start? Fuck, this has been so long. No, these were founded in 2015. Who was the Gang of Eight or whatever? That was like under Obama, right? I might just be thinking like Trump. But for whatever reason, Republicans have always just been better at mobilizing their different factions, like in Congress or in elected positions, versus the progressive wing of the Democratic Party was absent from all lawmaking.
So there is no coalitional fight to be had. It's all Donald Trump. And if Donald Trump wants to name a former left-wing environmentalist to be the HHS secretary, everyone says, okay, that sounds like a fantastic idea. That's exactly who we were going to nominate too. Thank you, Donald. It's wonderful. Yeah. Tip of my tongue. On the Democratic side, there is a fight, and it's happening right now. And our book is trying to win a certain intra-left coalitional fight about defining the future of liberalism in the Democratic Party. So I'm not of the left. I'm certainly not of the far left. I have center-left politics and maybe even like a center-left personality style, if we can even...
What is the solution if they have such a small fraction of power on Congress/the party, but such a big influence in culture, which is what normies choose the party by? People just need to be braver and just not give in all the time to it. Like Republicans are shameless because they know they don't need any shame. They can just say or do whatever, and nobody's going to give a fuck. Nobody's punished the Republicans for sucking off Andrew Tate and all them. But on the left, for some reason, Democratic lawmakers or companies think for some reason they think that progressives have all this power to regulate anything. I don't know. I don't know why. I don't know where this comes from. I don't even know if there are examples of this happening where somebody's lost legitimately. They've legitimately lost an election because they didn't give in to the left enough. I don't know if this has happened before. So I don't know where these fears come from.
Even call it that. But I do not begrudge the left for fighting because there's a fight to be had. In many ways, I think sometimes they see, I'm not endorsing this, I'm describing it. I think they see their near-term opposition as not always the Republican Party, but as the forces in the Democratic Party that are in the way for them controlling one of the two major parties in this country. And so they do have an oppositional style, and maybe that's personality-based. They are fighting the center-left. They are criticizing the center-left consistently. But I want to be good faith about this, even though I don't share their politics, and say that they're doing it because they're trying to win power on the left of center. And so that's why they're criticizing the way they are. Now, our book and much of my writing is an attempt to do a little bit of a very specific dance. Ezra touched on this, I think, really beautifully. We're in an era right now of anti-institution politics, anti-establishment politics. And Democrats are at risk right now as being seen as the party that always defends institutions, the party that always defends the establishment status quo. And that is an absolute death knell, I think, for this century's angry anti-establishment politics. So what we're trying to do is essentially say, here's a way to channel the anger that people have at the establishment, but toward our own ends, right? We believe that we have answers on housing and energy and high-quality governance and science and technology, really good answers that are fiercely critical of the status quo in Democrat-led cities and Democrat-led states. We're trying to be oppositional in a way that's constructive rather than just destructive.
Just to put a nice, pretty bow tie on the whole thing, let me ask for advice. What do I need to do for AOC to do a 3-hour interview with Ezra from your throne of wisdom?
I don't think I know how you get AOC herself to do it. I would not pretend to know her offices or her particular views on this. I do think, though, that you can see different Democrats taking on different kinds of risks. Right now, we're sort of in the age of Gavin Newsom starting a podcast. I mean, Gavin Newsom is the governor of California, and he's spending some percentage of his time
doing a podcast
with Charlie Cook and Michael Savage and Steve Bannon. Gavin Newsom realizes that one lane for a Democrat is to be high risk and talking to virtually everybody. I think Pete Buttigieg, in a different way, is somebody who wants to take media risks. Now, I think my gut on him is he's going to hold his powder a little bit. So he'll probably want to do the Lex Fridman podcast, assuming he runs in 2028, in 2027. Buttigieg, right. I think a lot of them are trying to figure out what is the lane for right now. And there's a lane for the next 2 years, and there's a lane for the 2 years after that. And you're going to see a lot of people begin to blanket media in the 2 years after that. And that'd be interesting. I would be curious to know, would Hakeem Jeffries come on to do your show right now? That'd be interesting. I mean, would he do it for 4 hours? I don't know. The 4-hour ask, the 3 to 4 hour ask, as somebody who also books politicians, is hard. I have trouble. I like to book people for 90 minutes to 2 hours, and I tend to get negotiated down to, I try not to go under 75 or 65, but even as somebody I think well-regarded in that world, it's very, very, very hard for me to get politicians to sit for 2 hours.
I don't have the sense that the 3-hour ask is a big ask because of scheduling. I think it still is grounded in the fear of saying the wrong thing.
I just think they're used to something else, right? I think that when you talk, they are scheduled by schedulers, right? If you talk to them yourself, if you end up having a personal relationship with Wes Moore of Maryland, and he wants to do your show, he will tell his scheduler, I want 3 to 4 hours to do the show. But the scheduler is used to a world. The staff is used to a world where nobody gets 3 to 4 hours with the boss. Reporters don't, donors don't, policy staffers don't. So then when some interview comes in and they say, hey, I want 3 to 4 hours, the answer is no, because culturally it's not done. You need Donald Trump himself, Pete Buttigieg himself, AOC herself to say to their staff, no, we're making time for this. Right. Because it's not how they make time for things normally. I don't know how much it is fear. I do think they're unused to it, but I suspect a lot of it is simply booking culture. Like I run into it too. They're not used to saying yes to 3 to 4 hours for anything. It's not that they don't have it. They have 3 to 4 hours if their kid is having a graduation, right? I mean, they're human beings. They can make time, but it would have to come in a way from them. My sense is this is part of the Rogan. It's very unclear because there are very differing stories on what happened in the Rogan-Harris negotiations, but it does seem that time is one of the sticking points.
It's also possible that you're going to find, as you try to interview Democratic politicians, that the exact same thing that happened with tech CEOs is going to happen among Democratic politicians. You interviewed some tech CEOs, and then they did a great job. And their friends were like, you were fantastic on a Lex Fridman podcast. That was such a great thing that you said in, minute 97. And then there becomes a bit of a meme that you can create really high-value moments for yourself if you appear on Lex's podcast. And then it becomes less risky for the next marginal CEO to say yes. And I think right now, what we're talking about fundamentally is not physics. It's culture. It's just norms. I think there's a fear of low expected value if you're a high-ranking Democratic politician and if you do a podcast like this. What if I say the wrong thing and it goes viral and my bookers and my agenda people and myself just feel terrible for the next few weeks because all we see on Blue Sky and X is just people hating. But if you get one interview that goes well, if you talk to Wes Moore, let's say, and there's a 5-minute segment where he articulates some vision of liberalism in the 2020s that everyone says, my gosh, that is the best possible articulation of what the Democratic Party can stand for the next 4 years that I've ever heard. Suddenly what's happened is that appearing on the show becomes massively de-risked. And in fact, the risk valence entirely switches. We are leaving dollars on the floor.
This is when you were scheduling political people. It was always if you could get one, you could get everybody. Because then what happens is the this time with the DNC scheduling too even, that as soon as you do one, and it's not a disaster, all the others are looking at it like, fuck, well, hold on, this guy went on this dude's platform and he spoke to this audience. Are we really going to not speak to that same audience when one guy already did it? But getting that first person is like the hardest thing.
Not appearing on this guy's podcast because I'm AOC. I'm a sensational communicator. If Wes Moore can do it, I can do it even better. And so I think to a certain extent, there's a little bit like of a riot theory phenomenon here. The person who throws the first stone in a riot has to be very courageous. The person who throws the 100th and first stone in a riot doesn't need to be courageous at all. And there might be a little bit of that going on, that people need to see proof of high expected value before it breaks what we're acknowledging to be a bit of a communications norm on the left.
That's a really convincing and powerful theory. I think I want to push back on it because so what's going to happen? For example, this very conversation, you're both going to come off brilliant.
Well, we're barely like 50 minutes into a 4 hours.
Let's see what happens. I have no more material. Right. It's all straight downhill.
But what people will
get tired.
They'll listen to this and they're like, well, that's Ezra. Like, he's brilliant. They're going to be worried about their own candidate. If AOC comes off brilliant, they're not going to be thinking, oh, this is a place to be brilliant. They're going to be like, well, that's because AOC is brilliant, but my candidate is not. It still boils down to the caution. I've had a lot of high-profile Republican people reach out to me. They don't give a shit. They're just like, whatever, I'll come. People on the left, I've had 2 people who I respect deeply and admire express caution about the previous people I've interviewed and not wanting to come on.
Well, that's the thing the left has to get over. Yeah, like what? That's a very important cultural. They began to do a thing where spaces were verboten because it had platformed so-and-so. And I think that culture is changing. I think they realized, that they abandoned huge, vast swaths of significant culture because, like, they wouldn't go places. It's crazy. Like, you have to, the idea that you only go where people agree with you is genuine lunacy. I don't want to act as your booker here. And 2020 candidates are what they are, and they each have their own press strategy. But I would say, like, I'm doing this myself on my show. I don't think the best people to get right now in the Democratic Party are the 7 people who lead the polls. Like, I'm looking for people who will think out loud. Like, I just had Jake Auchincloss on. He's like a not that well-known House member from Massachusetts. I just think he's a guy who thinks out loud. I am booking someone else right now like that. I have 2 more people like that, frankly, who are neither of them. They're like I could get like a bigger name. I'm more interested in people who are thinking. Like, one reason I think Bernie Sanders always did everything is, to him, the thing he was really doing was he had something to say. The point of almost everything for Bernie Sanders is to be in a place where people can hear the thing he has to say. And a lot of politicians don't have that, right? The point of anything is what it does for them in the polls, what it does for them with the donors, how it repositions them. I'm interested right now at this moment because it's not 2028. It's not 2027. There's no Democratic primary happening right now. The idea that you're going to like pre-run the Democratic Party is stupid, or primary is stupid. We don't even know what we might be in World War III. right? We have no idea what, we might have, AGI. Like the things that the 2027 primary might be about, the kinds of scandals that might have erupted by them are totally different. Whereas, the reason to have people on is because they are saying something. They're a live mind in the moment that has a perspective on this that you want to hear. And so I would look for that. And I think a lot of people who are not, there are people who are trying to protect something, protect a standing in the polls, protect a sort of coalitional set of allies they currently have. And then there are people who are, trying to just be heard. Again, a lot of Bernie Sanders' culture, the way he does media, is now Bernie Sanders is Bernie Sanders. He didn't used to be. He wasn't in 2015 even. Like when Bernie Sanders ran for president in 2015, it wasn't initially a big deal. It was like, oh, bummer, Elizabeth Warren didn't run for president, was a feeling of most people on the left. And so Bernie Sanders was a guy who's been saying the same thing for decades, but in the wilderness and nobody was listening.
Yeah.
And now he still has the instincts of somebody who understood that like the most important thing was to find a place where people would listen, where they would let you talk and even better let you talk for a while. I think the candidate who's going to do well in 2028 is going to have an instinct like that. But even right now, I think the question is, one of my big questions as I'm booking for my show is just, I want someone who has a perspective on this moment, who feels like they have had a thought that is about right now and who we are right now and what the story of America is right now.
I think what's really important is what Ezra said. It's about having something to say. We wanted to talk to you and talk together about how much we wanted to talk to you because we got something to say. We wrote a 300-page book about how much we have to say. We love going on podcasts and television shows and radio and then doing live events to tell people what we have to say. We think this idea of abundance isn't just important for redefining what the American left means. We think that the outcome of thinking abundantly about housing and energy and science and technology is what politics is all about. It's about giving people the good life, and we think this is the path toward it. So certainly one thing that's profoundly motivated us is having something very concrete that we just want to get out there in the world. Like my sense as a writer, as a thinker, is I want my software running on as many pieces of hardware as possible. I want to get my ideas out there as much as possible. And who gets credit for them and where the idea goes, and that's all secondary. I believe in ideas because they're important. And so I want to talk to people who have large platforms about those ideas, because how else is the idea getting to the mainstream except through those large platforms? That's how broadcast technology works in the first place. So maybe one thing that you're touching on is a little bit of ideological ambiguity. Maybe a part of this is the sense that people don't know exactly what it is they have to say for 3 hours. All I can say for sure is that we know.
There's also a reality, and I mean, the book is trying to enter into this reality. I think one thing you're saying is that people have coded you. And so Donald Trump is really excited to do it, and maybe left-wing politicians are not. One thing that we think is that we're in a period of realignment. The last chapter of the book, we talk about an idea that is picked up from a historian named Gary Gerstle, which is the idea of political orders. And political orders are periods that have a sort of structure of consensus and a structure of a zone of conflict. But it's more or less agreed on by the two sides, even if only tacitly. So you have a New Deal order. New Deal order is founded by FDR. It is entrenched when Dwight Eisenhower accepts the New Deal as part of the U.S. proving that it can treat workers better than the Soviet Union. So those are sort of right there, the three ingredients typically of an order. You have a party that starts it, opposition party that accepts key premises, right? Dwight Eisenhower doesn't come in and say, we're going to roll back the whole New Deal. And it's often held in place by an external antagonist. In that case, the in the 70s, stagflation, the Vietnam War, a series of problems that the New Deal order no longer seems able to handle. So you have the rise of what he calls the neoliberal order. And the neoliberal order is, if you're going to choose a founder, it's going to be Reagan on that one, right? It's much more about markets. It is very concerned with things like inflation. And it really is entrenched by Bill Clinton. The era of big government is over. And partially it's entrenched also by the fall of the Soviet Union, right? The fall of the Soviet Union is like this proof point that
neoliberalism
the sort of capitalists are right, that markets are the way of the future, government does not know what it's doing. And that becomes like the governing set of assumptions. And so there are arguments about what the markets should be doing, right? Obamacare is about creating sort of markets in health insurance, right? You can use markets for very progressive ends. We want to use markets for lots of progressive ends. But the neoliberal order basically collapses amidst a financial crisis and climate change. And China. And those are the three things that sort of Gerstle, but also separately we think kill it, which is the neoliberal order does not have an answer to the financial crisis, and it botches in many ways the answer to the financial crisis, puts too little demand into the economy, lets a sort of recession linger and a very slow recovery linger for too long. It doesn't know what to say really about climate change. Markets have made a lot of people rich by doing a lot of things that are very, very damaging for the environment, very damaging for the future of the human race potentially. And you have the rise of China. And the neoliberal order said, you integrate China into the global economy. You bring them into the WTO. You trade with them. You help them build their industrial base. You help them pull their people out of poverty, which that part is good. And they will become more like the West. They will liberalize. They will have a free press. They will. The richer we make China, the more China is going to become like us. And that proves totally wrong. right? China becomes more authoritarian over time, but it also sort of develops an industrial base. It becomes, as it does not become more like us, becomes dangerous, at least in our view, right? You don't want to ever have a conflict with another country who you've outsourced your key industrial base to. And so you have this sort of fall of that order. And then, again, here, things that would have been ridiculous at one point in American politics then become possible. Bernie Sanders is one of them, right? The idea that you would have somebody, a self-described socialist, running for president and coming anywhere near the Democratic nomination, that was unthinkable in 2004. And by 2016, it almost happened. And Donald Trump is another thing. Donald Trump runs like headlong into the failures of neoliberalism in the Republican Party. He runs against trade. He runs against a sort of Paul Ryan, more open immigration. George W. Bush and John McCain were both very big on liberalizing immigration policy. He runs against the Iraq War and, sort of foreign adventurism. And there's a sort of isolationist instinct that coexists very awkwardly now within a territorial expansionist instinct, but at least in 2016, it was more isolationist. And so Donald Trump, in his sort of reimagining of the Republican Party as a right-wing populist, more like sort of some Christian democratic parties in other countries, up in that quadrant of socially conservative, economically populist, that becomes something that's possible. But nothing has found an equilibrium. Right? Nobody's agreed to the other side's premises. There are certain ones that people are agreeing on. Both the Republican and Democratic parties have a very different view on China now. Right? Like Biden kept a lot of Trump's policies on China and actually strengthened them. And now Trump is building on that aggressively again. But in terms of the other things, there isn't agreement about what the next period in American politics should look like. And that's one reason I think it's very dangerous, both as a question of media strategy, but also as a question of politics, to code people, places, platforms too tightly. Republicans and Democrats aren't going to get along in Congress. That has to do with, I think, the incentives of Congress. My first book is called Why We're Polarized. It's about those almost hydraulic incentives for partisanship. But in terms of what is the meaning of my podcast, of Derek's, of yours, of Joe Rogan, of Theo Vaughn, of Call Her Daddy, of a million different places that are not well coded, that's, I think, very up for grabs. I mean, Elon Musk was an Obama-era liberal in 2012. I mean, I think his personal process of radicalization is not going to unwind itself. But a lot of the people who Democrats are like, all these billionaires are right-wing now. No, people are just uncertain. I mean, some of them are a little bit afraid, but people are uncertain. They're moving back and forth. The sort of texture of it is unsettled. And it's going to take time. These transitionary periods, I mean, they can go very badly too, but they take time. And I think people who are clinging to old certainties about what tells you which side folks are on, my sense is a lot of people who are very open to MAGA in 2025 are going to feel very differently about it in 2028, depending on how they do, right? If they do great, then they're going to entrench. But if they don't, then a lot of people who became MAGA curious are not going to be MAGA curious anymore. But they're not going to want the last Democratic Party either. I was making this point to someone the other day about why the Democratic Party's embrace of the Liz Cheney style independent didn't work. Liz Cheney, of course, being Dick Cheney's daughter, a Republican. But what Liz Cheney, the Never-Trumpers were a way of reaching out to who the Democratic Party thought the independents were. But the key thing about an independent to a political party is not that they don't like the other party. It's that they're an independent because they also don't like your party. And so finding a bunch of people who are meant to be messengers to them about why they shouldn't like the other party, it's fine. But what you need to do is explain why they should like your party. You need to have some message. You need to accept some fault. You need to think about what it was about you that drove them away. One of our deep views about politics right now, and not politics, policy, the texture of the economy of the country, is that the last period in American politics, in the economy, was about demand. The fundamental problem coming out of the financial crisis was demand. We had too little demand in the economy. Behind that too little demand in the economy was this other thing that was building up, which was a cost of living crisis. Housing was getting super expensive. Healthcare, in certain ways, energy, but energy is more complicated in ways we can talk about. Elder care, child care, higher education, right? This is a point. My wife is a journalist at The Atlantic, Annie Lowry with Derek. And she wrote this piece in 2020, early 2020, right before the pandemic, that went very viral, called The Affordability Crisis. And it sticks in my head because she's writing at a time when people were saying the economy's great. Everything's great. Like, you looked at measures of consumer confidence in 2020, February of 2020, terrific. She's like, so how come if the economy's so great, everybody I talk to is so upset? And she's like, look, people are making more money than ever, but it's getting eaten up and eaten up and eaten up by these things they really need. They keep getting more expensive even as consumer goods get cheaper. Then the pandemic hits, the problem becomes COVID. But then you have inflation. And inflation moves a problem of the economy, the fundamental problem everybody's paying attention to, from the demand side, how do we get more people at work? How do we get them to spend more money? To the supply side, we don't have enough. Right? We have a constriction of semiconductors, of used cars, and then eventually everything, right? Everything is getting more expensive. And we do get, we'll see what happens with tariffs. We do get, by 2024, the rate of inflation under control, but prices are still much higher. And now people are paying real attention to prices. And the affordability crisis which again is a cost of living crisis, which had been growing for a very long time, is now at crisis levels. And it becomes the substance of politics. People, you had all these Democrats saying, I don't know what the problem is. Like inflation has come down to whatever it was, 3 to 4% in 2024. And they're right about that. But one, the price level of everything remained high. But two, people were now like, the fuck is housing so expensive for? Like, I'm never going to be able to afford a home. Like, my parents went to public university debt-free. I could never do that. And what we've done is fail. I mean, Democrats in this case, Republicans haven't done that great on it either, but in blue states, Democrats have failed on cost of living. The reason California, Illinois, New York are losing hundreds of thousands of people to Florida, Texas, Arizona, Colorado is
Are they still losing people? I thought that trend had reversed. Also, those places where people are going are also becoming more and more expensive as well. In Florida, I'm pretty sure housing affordability has become a big problem. I think it's one of the reasons why DeSantis is looking to eliminate property tax. Like, again, it's boring, and I'm usually not like monovariate on issues because it's usually a really dumb position to take. But housing, I feel like, is just one of those like super simple issues that everybody overcomplicates the fuck out of. Or rather, it's he's fucking with my shit. I hear him fucking with my shit. Maybe it's not, the problem is easy to identify, or it's simple to identify, but it's not easy to solve, maybe, I guess. But people want to do all sorts of other ways to navigate around it.
They fail on cost of living. It is too expensive to live there. And the reason they fail at cost of living is supply. They did not make enough. They actually made it too hard in many cases to make enough of the things people needed. Some of those are straightforward, like we didn't let people build enough homes. Some of them are more like we've made it too expensive to build public infrastructure, like high-speed rail or the Second Avenue subway. Some of it has to do, I think, in the long run with innovation and the relationship between Democrats and technology. But one of our views is that there are other things in politics that will matter too. But we are in a period where the cost of living, supply, affordability is the fundamental economic question. Donald Trump himself has said he won because of the price of groceries. He's got this very funny quote where he's like, nobody said, I don't have a Donald Trump impression, but he's like, nobody ever used the word groceries in politics before I did. Well, it'd be good if he then wasn't making it more expensive. But Democrats believe his weakness is cost of living. They're probably right, but they don't have a strength on it. And the key question our book is trying to refocus politics on is how do we make more of what we need? How does government either organize itself or organize markets to create more of what we need? And how do we admit, as liberals, times when we've made it so the government makes it too hard to make more of what we need? I'll say one last thing in this pretty long answer. I thought one of the most important things that has come out recently is a piece in Foreign Affairs by Brian Deese, who's a former head of Joe Biden's National Economics Council. And Deese helped negotiate every major bill Biden passed. It's a very straightforward piece about what it is Democrats have not done to make it possible to build at the level of their goals. And he says things like, we should just remove federal funding from cities that have highly restrictive home zoning codes. He says we should have a goal for how much nuclear we build in the next 10 years. We should be trying to reach a goal of new nuclear capacity. It's a very, very important piece because Deese is right at the center of Democratic policy. Instead of retrenching, he's like, okay, we didn't get there. What do we do now to make it possible to get to the place we promised you we can go?
And we should say that the book you've mentioned, which I've gotten a chance to read, and I think it's incredible, highly recommend. It's called Abundance. I think of it as a kind of manifesto for what the left would represent in the coming years. So I think people should read it from that angle. And both of you have been writing about this topic sort of from different angles for a while. I think in 22, Derek, you wrote an article on this topic of abundance titled "A Simple Plan to Solve All of America's Problems." And Ezra, you wrote an article in 21 on supply side progressivism titled "The Economic Mistake the Left is Finally Confronting." And you've just laid out.
Okay. Listen, I love and appreciate Ezra Klein, but I feel like I've heard what he has to say on everything. I feel like I'm guessing nothing like really new or groundbreaking from Ezra Klein is coming out here. He's a smart dude. We like listening to him, but I think we've heard everything he has to say.